Hello, universe. Welcome to Pickathon Podcast, episode 24. I'm your host, Zale Schoenborn. I am founder of the Pickathon Music Festival and living here in Portland, Oregon. And this is not a festival podcast, I should say. This is a podcast about discovery, and it's about kind of creative processes and just conversation and people and figuring out things and kind of connecting the dots in ways, hopefully, that it happens when you talk to people. So wish us luck. My guest today is Madison McFerrin. She's going to be an incredible guest, and we'll be talking to her in a couple minutes. You know, one thing that really came up for me thinking of this conversation and doing my research about Madison is there's kind of an interesting theme that it just really resonates with myself. It's just kind of being present or out of your head. You know, what is that? Such a common human experience is that sometimes you can create really crazy worlds in your head that are just manifestations of your fears, anxieties. And my world is absolutely like that. And running a festival and is like that. Well, what's interesting about art and kind of music and culture and is that it really is kind of one of those things that makes you in the moment. It makes you present. It's really, whenever you ever think about enjoying yourself at something like a, concert or festival, it's because you just were there, like those are the best moments. If you're just worrying about something else that never really, you can't control, you're probably not really experiencing that festival or that kind of art. So weird dichotomy between having, in a business that creates these kind of moments and putting on those moments or creating that music or going through the process as a creator and artist, and I'm a musician too. And I experience the same thing with the music. It's like so much of that creative process is trying to be present, and it's very much parallels life for lots of people, whether it's noticing what is kind of setting you off, like what, not necessarily giving it power. I always say like being in the house and watching it rain versus being in the rainstorm. It's kind of my first aha analogy for myself was like, it's really stressful putting on, running company, doing creative, anything, putting on a festival year round. You're dealing with things like toilets and just spending too much money or spending, not doing the right things or all the little things you can improve or art, this is the kind of cool art we want to create, these experiences all coming together in kind of like an experience together that is, that makes you have this kind of out of body present amazing experience that changes lives. And music does that, festivals can do that, art, all kinds of culture, dance. And it's just really personal for me to think that, if you think about a festival like Pickathon, just think about all of the kind of work that goes into that. We are always trying to get better and always kind of nervous and just being open here that it's really kind of hard to be, you just stay connected to the family, to local things happening that are important in your life, even as you work really hard to be creative and create all these future things. It's not automatic. And I kind of think the more successful you are, there's, the one kind of truism for everyone, and whether it's a festival, it starts over every day. Like it's like, okay, that was a great day. You can wake up the next day just crazy, not knowing what's going on that day. And I know this is a human experience, but I know it just really resonates and kind of on how much effort I'm going through. And I know other folks go through to be there to create this special moment in time when it happens. And man, is it magical when you actually get to be part of it, both creating it and experiencing it. I'm really adamant about just being at that, in those moments when something I create. I don't really want to work it. I want to experience it. How was it? Was it good or not? So, I think there's a lot of parallels and introspection and kind of like I hear in my guests, and I want to let's bring on Madison.
All at the same thing, stop us every time. Why with the changing. Feels like a goodbye, but no sacrifice.
How you doing, Madison?
I'm doing pretty well. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Today's a good day. I'm not so much deep in my head.
That's good. That's good. Definitely easy to get in your head.
Oh yeah. It's kind of one of these shared human experiences that I don't think people talk about enough. You know what I mean? It's just like you got to be tough, right? Just figure it out. And I think there's kind of a art form to like being present. Like it's like it's skills you have to work on, right?
Totally.
Madison, your music, it's so amazing. We've been kind of a fan for a long time. You have kind of huge richness of inspiration, of musical kind of connections to jazz, R&B, a cappella. You are you have a very unique background. And somebody might guess that you were in music, but like where were you grew up in San Francisco? Is that where you grew up?
I grew up a little all over the place. I was born in San Francisco, but we moved just before I turned 3. And I spent my elementary school years in Minneapolis, my middle school and high school years in Philadelphia. Then I was in college in Boston, and then I lived in Brooklyn for 8 years, and now I'm in LA.
Wow.
So it's been a big hop around.
Yeah, and I kind of can guess what your musical inspirations were early on, but maybe you tell me. Was it places you were? Was your family?
It was a combination of stuff. Definitely mostly within the household, and I think that had a wide range of things because, obviously I come from a legacy of musicians, but also, my oldest brother Taylor, who is also a musician, he's 10 and a half years older than me, so he was like really putting me on to a lot of the music in the 90s, so like a lot of the hip hop and R&B of that time, and then, I also was just like a product of the 90s and pop radio and was listening to a lot of like NSYNC and Spice Girls and stuff like that. So the range would go from, Spice Girls to Stravinsky. So there was lots of, to Stevie Wonder. So there was a lot of stuff happening in the household.
Yeah. And if somebody is under a rock and doesn't know your dad, we'll just say your dad, Bobby McFerrin, is kind of huge music in America, musically influential in America. He had a #1 hit back in 1988, actually best record and right of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Artist of the year. That's like a huge, crazy thing to have in your household.
Yeah. Well, that actually happened before I was born. So it was like so like to have the experience after the fact is definitely interesting. And it's funny that you say like huge in America because he's definitely much bigger like in Europe and in other places. I think that has to do with their appreciation for wider ranges of music.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's, he had obviously having success by having a #1 single, but I bet you in over the life, he probably charted a lot more in different places in the across the world, right, than US.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird. That's true for a lot of American music, more kind of not pop, not so much the pop or the but like the roots based stuff like really does better. Jazz does better, and other
Yeah, it definitely does.
Even like EDM DJs, they do better. I always wondered, is that, why do you think that? Why is that?
It's a good question. I think that just the culture there is a little more open to different styles of music. I mean, I also noticed that myself. Like I do pretty well in Europe. I think that there's just an openness that is not as present in America. I think there's a greater emphasis on pop and top 40 in America versus, I guess like there's just like a deeper culture of exploration sonically.
Yeah.
In Europe that's a bit more accepted, and people are willing to listen to things that might be left of center, and people who take chances with the type of art that they're creating, versus I think America is very much like, who has the biggest hit,
fed by the algorithm,
who's a pop star.
Yeah.
Right. Well, now, yeah, for sure.
So Did you have like outside of your family, were you connecting musically like when you were in these different towns? Was there a kind of like a beginning of your musical journey in one of those places?
I mean, I think I always was drawn to musical things. You know, I was always doing little performances and I was in, different classes and stuff like that, and always sought out ways in which I could express myself best musically, regardless of where I was.
Were you in band, or were you in like any band, like high school bands or anything like that?
I mean, I was in like choir and chorus. I was in the
Mm-hmm.
a cappella group.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was in those type of things. And then in college, I had a band. So I was always doing different things throughout my life.
Where did you go to school? Where'd you go to college?
Berkeley College of
Oh
Music
my
in
goodness.
Boston.
Yes. And that's just I just talking to some 19-year-old kids called the Mountain unit the other day that are going there now. And
Oh, nice.
they were yeah, they're friends with like one of our neighbors here in Portland who's also going there, Tage Garvin. And what an incredible place, right, to go to school.
It's a wild institution, I can tell you that much. You get to meet a lot of really amazing people, and being in a musical environment like that is it's an experience for sure.
Yeah, my sense of it is you kind of like, you might be on some level of like talent and kind of competency, but when you come into a place like that where there are so many people and probably way more practiced and kind of like, so many mentors and so many people and peers with so much talent, it's got to be really kind of impactful to go there.
Yeah, it's definitely a place that weeds out the serious musicians pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of folks get there and then, it's the first time that they're in an environment like that,
Mm-hmm.
and they recognize that, oh, maybe I do really love music, but it's not what I want to devote my whole life to.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work. And once you get put into a place like that where it's like you really got to work hard to stand out and to focus, it definitely weeds out folks pretty early on.
Did you have any kind of like seminal professors there or anything that really impacted you, or peers that you met there?
Yeah, I mean, my friends from college are still my friends now. I would say that like really like being in a band and playing with them was the biggest teaching learning experience that I had. And I had a couple great teachers, but it was really just about the experience of being with all of those musicians all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, was it how far from then to when you started actually putting out your first music?
Well, the band that I was in college, we put out an EP in like 2012 or something like that, but I didn't start putting out my own solo music until 2016.
What was that? Who was that band? Is it still around?
It was called No, it's not. I mean, we are all still alive.
Yes.
And actually, there's a mini reunion of sorts on my album, but we were called Cosmodrome. We had a
That's
good
awesome.
time. We were kind of like a funk jam band of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
It's where I really cut my teeth as a front woman.
That's awesome. So some of them actually played on your new record.
So the song Utah,
Mm-hmm.
that's them on there.
Don't think I could take it. For now, let's make it through the night. Gotta get out of Utah. Gotta get back home.
That was a fun way to reunite.
I mean, that's interesting because you went from playing in a band to really honing your craft kind of solo, right? Like early on, for a while, and you're really working on all the different kind of ways you could present from a solo perspective, right? Live.
Yeah. It was definitely a shift, but I think it was a necessary one for my own personal growth. I just needed to experience what it meant to be a solo artist, and I wasn't like intentionally being like I don't want to play with anybody else, but I think that there was just something inside of me that like needed to prove to myself that I could.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely feel like it was the right decision because I think I've been able to travel the world just doing solo shows, and I'm incredibly confident and competent as a solo performer, which only makes it easier to add more musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I know that I can go from having a three-piece band to just being me.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of people like they know how to play with other musicians, but they don't know how to perform just themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And also just like from a pragmatic standpoint, as an independent musician, being able to have the option to just perform by myself
Yeah.
from a financial standpoint is very helpful.
Yeah.
And so it was good to be able to kind of make a name for myself, one with being able to show people like how competent I am as a solo performer,
Mm-hmm.
to then shift and expand and be like, but I also am a very competent band woman, like band leader, front woman.
Yeah.
I think that that's been a really necessary part of my journey as an artist.
And it's incredible. You're right. I mean, having the resilience to kind of in hard times or like in any time band gets sick or something, you could do it solo, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's great because I have options, and there have been a few times in this COVID era that we're in where it's like I've had moments where I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to perform with a band, and like you said, somebody gets sick or like these other things happen, and it's like, oh, now I can only perform by myself. And for a lot of people, that would be incredibly daunting, and like maybe they would have to back out of shows or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. But for me, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Like, let me just go back to doing what I was doing for a number of years. So I think that it definitely works in my favor.
I mean, there's a lot of skills you have to learn, to kind of add new tricks playing solo, right? Like you're using your voice, you're using tracks, you're looping too, right? You're doing all kinds of stuff at the same, like it's like a skill. It's a pretty,
Yeah.
it's like a whole nother set of learning it like an instrument to play by yourself.
Yeah. It's definitely a skill set. And also, it goes beyond just being able to play your instrument or sing well.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to be a solo performer, you also have to be very engaging with the audience.
Right.
And I think that that's a really important part of being a performer,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in my field. So to be able to have the confidence that I can get up there by myself and keep an audience engaged for 60 minutes or so is something that I'm super proud of. But I come from, my dad's a solo performer, my brother Taylor's a solo performer. Like I was never really concerned that performing solo was something that I wouldn't be able to do,
Mm-hmm.
just because I have that as my closest reference point.
Oh yeah. That's interesting. Did your dad go through a phase of playing with a band, or was it almost always solo?
He played with a band early on in his career, and then solo, and then like has obviously toured with bands. I was in a band with him in college. I sang backups with the tour that he last did for his last album that came out in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and same thing with my brother. It's like he has performed solo a lot, and like he also has performed with bands. So I think it's just the way the McFerrins roll.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And in top of the performance, I hear there's an interesting thing when in your lyrics, like there's kind of like the lyrics coming at you, but there's something deeper in them almost always if I start thinking about them. I don't know if
That's the very intentional. It's very intentional.
Is it? Yeah, no,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
it's really kind of fascinating because it presents sometimes in one way, and then if you really start thinking about it, you're like, I don't know if that's actually the meaning.
No, I really love writing from a standpoint where it's like you think it might be about one thing, but if you dive deeper, it's actually about something else, or you can have it be applicable to multiple situations. That's always an approach that I like to take from a lyrical standpoint, because I don't want to write music that's just like so surface level that you immediately get it. But I think there's an art to being accessible while simultaneously like having deeper meanings.
Yeah. What's one of your kind of example you could tell us about it?
My song Hindsight sounds like a breakup song,
Yes, it
but
does.
it's actually a song about me being sad that Bernie Sanders didn't win the Democratic nomination.
That's so awesome.
So, that's
Could have said we went for it. Could have said we went for it.
funny enough. It's like, I feel like the ones that sound like breakup songs are actually about other things. Like the song Learn Your Lesson and Unwise are both about friendship breakups.
Oh, wow. I actually totally thought that was a breakup.
Nope. It's friendship, which is, tougher in some regards.
Yes. If you're an optimistic person like me who just wants to believe in people. And then when
Right, exactly. Exactly.
those kind of like if you make a purposeful breakup, it's like crushing, sometimes.
Totally.
It's
That's why I've written songs about it.
And, when I first became kind of aware, like the guy that helps us book, Nicholas Harris, I know he does some shows. He's had you before in Portland, Jack London, and before it was the album You Plus I, which was really just kind of took me by, it felt like there was some live tracks on there, and I was super curious how you played that, solo, like how it came off. And it was weird because it came on 2020. We were going to have you at the festival, and then COVID hit. And I don't know about you, but it was like insane for everyone, I think, creatively, who made a living off of either having people have events or venues or touring, right? Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
how was that for you?
So actually it's you and I, but it's just written with a plus sign.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. But you are far from the first person to say that. But no, I mean, it was such a massive just rug pull, as it was for everyone, I had been on the road for most of 2019 and had finally gotten a break in January and February of 2020 and was about to start hitting the road again mid-March. And then obviously that's when everything shut down. And it was incredibly difficult, traumatic. Live performance is definitely where I find the most joy out of being an artist.
Yeah.
And I just love having that engagement with people and sharing energy with people in that way. And so to not have that all of a sudden and to not have it for the foreseeable future was a very difficult thing to wrap my head around. But thankfully I was able to shift and I had a lot of really amazing supporters who were there for me. And also like the biggest silver lining in that whole moment of being forced to be home was I learned how to produce. And, I ended up producing 70% of I Hope You Can Forgive Me, which pre-COVID is not anything I would have thought possible.
Wow.
That was not a skill set that I had. So, all of these things happen for some kind of reason. And I guess for me, it was to learn a new skill set that I really enjoyed.
That's pretty wild. I mean, to be able to learn to produce, and that's your debut album. It came out in May, right? It came out May this year.
Correct.
Did that change how you approached the album when you kind of actually could produce it yourself?
Yeah, totally. I mean, all of a sudden this was a project where it was like, oh, I'm really going to be at the helm of this in a way that is different than what I had been anticipating. But it was really great because obviously there are a few songs on there that I worked with other producers, and I know that because I learned how to produce, I was that much more confident in the studio with these other people, just being able to say like what I wanted to hear, the different elements that I thought would be impactful in the music. And to this day, it's like if I get in the studio with somebody else, like just being able to like tap into my own knowledge about this skill set makes it makes me a better artist with other people, not just for myself.
I know it's kind of like you have another layer of things you can do creatively. You can produce people.
Yeah, totally.
Were you during COVID kind of around your family at all, or were you like in that same bubble with them?
It was a mix. At the time, my parents had relocated back to California. My oldest brother has been in Los Angeles for a number of years. And then my other brother, Javon, he and I were both still in Brooklyn. So we were kind of split. But we did make time once it was safe to be able to be with one another.
Yeah, I imagine that creatively or just technically some of the family, I mean, you guys have so much skills in your family, I mean, I just imagine it's kind of cool that you've been able to collaborate. Sometimes families in the same business, it's just like oil and water. It's hard.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
But that's not been it wasn't for you. You guys, it just somehow made it work, huh?
Well, I mean, we don't all work together all that much. So I think that probably
Helps.
Yeah, it does help. The most work I've done with my family would definitely be being on the road with my dad, which was really great. I really enjoyed that. But we kind of all have our own things that we do, and just like come together on a very loving, familial
Yeah.
plane.
Supporting each other in that way. It's not like
Right, totally.
Yeah, I mean, and unhealthy families that could be like competition, right? Like, oh no.
Right. Yeah. No, we are all very supportive of one another.
That's awesome. So you decided to kind of like go into the production side of this. Did you imagine that this record would be performed solo, or did you have a sense of whether you were going to add more live instrumentation live? Like, did you have a vision there?
I definitely knew that I wanted to add more instrumentation with the new record. But again, it was something where it's like, I know that I can perform it solo. I have performed it solo several times. So being able to go between the two is very helpful for me. But I definitely envisioned this involving more people on stage with me. Also because, back to what we were saying about European audiences being a little more receptive of stuff, there's something that is difficult for people to understand with watching one person on stage. I think that it sometimes doesn't translate mostly to like bookers.
Mm-hmm.
And then they see me perform and they're like, oh, this is great. But like the idea of like, oh, we need more people to fill out the stage. It'll look empty. Or like, how can one person like be engaging this whole time, So I know that I have definitely made a reputation for myself that I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But people think that having a band means you're growing or something. And so like, just from like an optics standpoint, it also makes more sense.
Band bias.
Right, yeah, totally. There's totally band bias. Mm-hmm. So I recognized that and was like, okay, so gotta add some more people so that these other folks can see like, oh, she can do this on a bigger scale. And it's like, I can do it on a bigger scale solo too. But if you feel like you need this from me, I will give it to you.
That's interesting. I mean, so in perfect world, solo would be how you'd love to present all the time?
No. I like playing with a band too.
Yeah.
It's a different vibe and it's a lot of fun. And I'm really enjoying just like having that new experience and sharing that new experience with audiences. Mm-hmm. It also takes a little bit of pressure off of me, which is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not the case that it's like, oh, I only wanted to perform solo forever and ever. But yeah, it's a good shift. It's a good shift. I enjoy it. I accept it. And I feel good about it.
That's cool. I mean, I can only imagine like the amount of how much you have to kind of be in the moment and present when you're solo, you know what I mean? Cause it's like if you distract and just are not there, in that kind of performance sense, it's just all on you. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much like I think I intentionally needed to put all of the pressure on me so that I could elevate to the space that I needed to as a performer. Mm-hmm. It's like I was like, don't help me do this. I need to do this on my own. And so now that I'm like, I've done that and I feel good about it, I'm like, okay, we can bring other people now. Other people can come. They can help me out.
I'm so curious. Like, Please Don't Leave Me Now is it's interesting. Your vocals are a little more gritty. I don't know if that's the way to say it. Like, it's just like, it's like a really subtle, cool, groovy song. So it sounds like sonically there were some things you were adding to, like in this new record, that were different than before.
Well, I think that also comes from not just doing a cappella stuff as well. Like, there's different ways to explore how your voice sounds when instrumentation is involved, especially from like a tonal quality. So I think that all has to do with the instrumentation and music that's happening around it. Like, that very much informs my approach vocally.
That's cool. And that song in particular, did I understand that correctly? Like, that was kind of like an introspection after a car crash, right?
Right, exactly. So, you turn trauma into art.
Always, right?
That people can dance to.
That is a banger dance song.
Right, yeah.
That's wild. When was that accident? Was that 2021 or?
Yeah, it was November 2021. And, always wear your seatbelts, because when you flip upside down in a car, they will keep you strapped in and you won't potentially die and break your neck.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like, and so that was kind of mid flight in writing this record, right? That came.
Yeah, that was definitely like the midway point of creating the record that accident happened.
Things like that, like traumatic things, near death experiences, and your close ones or yourself. It's just like, they're pretty huge things too, right? Like it had to be so kind of surreal, to look at your.
Oh yeah, it was super traumatic. Little pro tip for those listening: if you get into a car accident, you should immediately start playing Tetris, because it simulates EMDR therapy. This is true. There's studies about it. It simulates EMDR therapy, and it helps you not retain traumatic memories. And so I got very good at playing Tetris.
So just distracting your brain, or is it actually specifically Tetris?
No, it's specifically Tetris. Tetris simulates EMDR therapy, which allows you to not like internalize the PTSD.
What is EMDR? What's it stand for?
It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, if I'm not mistaken. And it's this type of therapy where you like look back and forth really fast while you talk about stuff.
Wow.
So it helps you, like, if you're talking about something super traumatic, your body doesn't kind of reignite the things that happened during the trauma. So it's like it allows your brain to kind of separate the two things. And there's all this research about how Tetris simulates that, because you're like looking back and forth like super rapidly, moving the pieces and stuff. So thankfully, my two best friends from growing up, they're both in mental health, and they were the first people I texted after the accident. And one of them was like, you need to download Tetris immediately and start playing. And so that's what I did. So there's a pro tip for all of you guys out there. Play Tetris.
Is it also part of a healthy thing? Can it help you non-traumatic? Is there actually benefits to that in any way? Like,
that I don't know. I just know about the PTSD. But like, if you look up like Tetris after car accidents or something like that, one of the first things that comes up is an NPR article, and they have this like drawing of this person with a thought bubble, and it's a car upside down.
No way.
Yeah.
That is so weird. I love weird things that I don't know. Like, this is like totally a pro tip.
Yeah, learn something new every day.
Yeah, I mean, talk about like being in your head and just feeling like, did you take it as like a second chance thing, or just like?
Oh, totally. Yeah, 100%. I was like, we walked away without a scratch, so I was like, I'm supposed to be here clearly.
Wow.
And it was very much like, okay, gotta really go after this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fully fledged album. I'm just trying to picture like how much of this accident had like kind of been really putting the finishing touches or the core energy into this. Because it was phenomenal. Like, we had our mindsets at the festival side on Pickathon to have you part of it before, because we knew that we we knew that you were going to be amazing live, solo or not.
I had a really great time. I mean, we played at 1 a.m., which is probably the latest set I've played. But we had a really great time, and the audience was there grooving with us. Yeah, it was super fun.
They're there for watching music. You know what I mean? They're fans.
Yeah.
And yeah, you missed the airplane or the flight.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I had a connection, and our first flight, they had to change a light bulb.
Mm-hmm. Oh no.
And
no.
in the exit row or something like that, they had to change a light bulb, and they were like, oh, this is going to take 5 minutes. And it took an hour. And so we missed our connection, which was, not great. And so we missed the first set that we had, but we made it up, and we had a good time.
That was great. No, yeah, I actually saw you played for Curation, our little meal chef plus.
Yeah, that was great. That was really fun.
Yeah, it's totally.
I'm all about good food, so anytime to perform and eat is wonderful for me.
It's a totally irrational thing for 100 people, right? But it's like super impactful, and just kind of like a good experience. It's like a mini mixture between food, the culture between food and music and just kind of setting and nature, So yeah, it was really awesome having you. It was so fun. And I'm looking forward to the future. What's coming up for you the rest of the year or next year? Anything big?
So I'm about to hit the road for about 7 weeks next week. So that's going to be pretty crazy. Doing U.S. dates in October and then Europe in November. And then just going to continue to tour. I'm going to be releasing some remixes. I've got some other stuff coming out. So I'm super excited.
That's awesome. Well, it's been a real pleasure to get to talk to you today and just kind of catch up.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. And with that, I'm going to say thank you, everyone. This is the end of Pickathon Podcast, episode 24. If you like this, make sure you go and check out our Patreon. We have kind of support there, kind of making this thing a real thing, helping feed people that are working hard for you. And we'll be back next week for another episode 25. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Madison. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Pickathon Podcast. This podcast is produced by Zale Schoenborn, Tanner McCullough, and Evan Throckmorton. Our artwork is by Travis Bone, and additional support by Ryan Stiles. The music you heard in this episode was by our guest of honor, Madison McFerrin. The songs included were No Room, Try, Utah, Hindsight, and the one we're riding out on right now, Leave Me Now, in parentheses, please don't. Be sure to check out our Pickathon Patreon, where we have exclusive interviews, content, and insights into the Pickathon world. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you hear your podcasts. And tell a friend about where they can get on the Pickathon bandwagon. Thank you to the whole Pickathon family. And like Zale said, we'll catch you all next week.
Please.